It was the summer of 2007, and I was 10 years old. Our family had a trip to Disneyland lined up, something we'd been looking forward to for months. To save some money, my mom booked us on a midnight flight that Tuesday, figuring my sisters and I would drift off to sleep during the ride. My sisters were 8 and 5 at the time, both clutching their tiny backpacks while we waited at the gate. The gate area was mostly empty, the fluorescent lights above buzzing quietly, casting pale reflections on the polished floor as we waited for our flight. At some point, my mom got up to take my youngest sister to the bathroom, her hand firmly around her tiny wrist as they headed off. A minute later, my dad leaned down to me and said, "Stay here and watch your sister for a second. I'm going to grab something quick to eat." His footsteps echoed as he walked away toward the dimly lit cafe, leaving me and my other sister perched nervously on the hard chair.
That's when a middle-aged woman approached us, walking slowly before she settled down into the seat right next to me. She rested her hand gently on my back, her touch cold and unfamiliar, her lips curling into a wide smile that felt too forced, too eager. She leaned in, her voice sugary as she acted all excited to see us, asking in a cheerful tone, "Where are your parents, sweetie?" I told her they'd be right back, glancing around the gate as unease settled into my stomach. That's when a middle-aged man approached as well, moving in with the same bright, exaggerated warmth that didn't match the tired, quiet atmosphere of the late-night terminal. He chuckled loudly, acting like he knew us, his eyes darting quickly to my sister and back to me. Then, with a wide grin, the man said he had just went into our dad at the cafe. He spoke as if it was the most normal thing in the world, introducing himself and the woman as our dad's cousins, smiling with too many teeth as he said it.
My sister and I glanced at each other, confusion in our eyes, and both of us muttered a shy hello. The man extended his hand toward my sister, beckoning her with a warm smile that felt like it was glued to his face, while the woman reached her hand out to me, her eyes fixed on mine, waiting. They told us they wanted to take us to meet their kids, their voices light and playful, insisting we come along. And so, with the blind trust only kids could have, my sister and I got up from our seats, slipping our small hands into theirs, and followed them away from the gate. They began leading us out of the gate area, past the cafe where my dad was supposed to be, down a quiet stairwell where the sounds of our footsteps echoed eerily, and toward the lobby of the airport where the air felt colder, emptier. It wasn't until I noticed we were heading toward the entrance of the airport, closer and closer to the sliding doors that led out to the dark parking lot, that a cold fear began to bloom in my chest. Finally, with a trembling voice, I asked the question that had been clawing at the back of my mind, "Where are we going?" The woman turned her head to look at me through her thick-framed glasses, that cheeky smile still plastered across her face, though her eyes seemed colder up close, under the harsh glow of the parking lot lights. With a casual, almost playful tone, she said, "Oh, our kids are just outside by the car." As we stepped out into the dark parking lot, the heavy sliding doors closed behind us with a mechanical sigh, cutting off the faint hum of the airport. The air outside felt heavy and stale, carrying the scent of exhaust and warm asphalt. The shadows of parked cars stretched long beneath the flickering orange lights overhead. I glanced at my sister, her small hand still wrapped in the man's, and a wave of unease crawled up my spine, tightening my chest. Something felt wrong, really wrong. I yanked my hand free from the woman's grip, my palm damp with sweat, and quickly reached for my sister's hand, pulling it away from the man's. My voice shook as I said, "We want to go back inside." The words fell into the thick silence of the parking lot, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Their faces changed instantly. The forced, cheeky smiles drained away, leaving behind flat expressions that felt like empty masks. Their eyes flickered to each other, and a silent tension snapped in the air. Without warning, the man spun toward us, his face tight with something I couldn't name, and wrapped his arms around me in a rough, sudden grip, pulling me off the ground. At the same time, the woman lunged toward my sister, grabbing her tightly, her nails pressing into my sister's arm as she lifted her. They didn't say anything. They just started carrying us, step by step, deeper into the parking lot. Panic exploded in my chest. My sister and I started screaming, our voices echoing off the metal of parked cars, sharp and desperate in the night air. We kicked and struggled, tears blurring the blinking lights above us. And then we heard shouting. 2 men's voices, strong and urgent, cutting through the chaos. Airport security. Their footsteps pounded across the asphalt as they ran toward us, their radios crackling faintly. The man and woman froze for a heartbeat, their eyes wide, and then dropped us. Just like that. Our feet hit the ground hard, and before we could even fully catch our breath, the pair turned and bolted, running faster than I thought anyone could, their figures weaving between cars, disappearing into the maze of shadows.
One of the security guards took off after them, shouting commands into his radio, his shoes slapping against the pavement. The other guard stayed with us, crouching down so his eyes were level with ours, trying to calm us down, asking if we were hurt, if we could stand. After a moment, he gently guided us back toward the glowing entrance of the airport, the doors sliding open as we stepped back into the cold air conditioning and the faint smell of coffee from the cafe. Every step felt heavy, the fear still buzzing under my skin. When we reached the gate area, my mom was there, clutching our younger sister, her face streaked with tears, sobbing uncontrollably like a baby, her body shaking as she wrapped us into her arms the second she saw us. It had only been a few minutes, but to me it felt like we had been gone forever. Thinking back now, it feels like a weird, uncomfortable memory that never sits right in my mind. I was so young, and it's strange, almost chilling, to realize that I didn't see any red flags when they first approached us. They never even gave us their names, and back then I didn't think twice about it. It was just minutes before I was supposed to board my flight to North Carolina for a job interview the next morning. Outside, the February night was stormy, the wind howling as rain pelted the tall glass windows of the airport, streaking down in blurry lines. Inside, the air was chilly, and everyone around me was bundled up in heavy jackets and scarves, quietly minding their own business, the low hum of distant conversations blending with the occasional crackle of the intercom. I was sitting alone in the terminal, eyes flicking up occasionally to the screen that listed the upcoming departures, waiting for my flight to be called. It was clear the flight wouldn't be packed. Only a few scattered travelers were in the waiting area, sipping coffee or scrolling on their phones, the storm outside keeping the airport quieter than usual. That was when someone came and sat down 2 seats away from me. At first, I didn't think much of it, even though it was slightly annoying considering nearly every other seat in the area was empty. I shifted in my chair, trying to ignore it, but something about the quietness of the space made the presence feel more intrusive. Then it moved from mildly annoying to something that twisted cold in my gut. I glanced over, and the man was staring directly at me. Not a casual glance, just staring, his eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I quickly turned my head, pretending not to notice, trying to act like it didn't bother me, but I could feel the weight of his gaze, like a cold hand pressing against the back of my neck. And then, without warning, he leaned over toward me, so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath near my ear, could hear the soft rustle of his jacket. His voice came out low, nearly drowned by the distant rumble of thunder outside. He whispered, "The 2 men sitting across from you are getting on the same plane, and they're planning on kidnapping you once you land in North Carolina." For a moment, it was like the world went silent, the words sinking in with a heavy, suffocating weight. I didn't know what to say, the fear buzzing beneath my skin, my mind scrambling for a response. All I could manage was a weak, confused, "What?"
As I turned to look at him, my voice nearly lost in the crackle of the intercom announcing another flight. But the heavy man didn't say anything else. He just stood up, his boots thudding softly against the carpet as he walked away, leaving me there with the words still ringing in my ears, echoing in the empty space he left behind. At that exact moment, my flight was called over the speakers, the voice calm and routine telling us it was time to board. My body felt stiff as I stood up, gripping the handle of my bag tightly, my eyes darting toward the two men sitting in the row across from where I'd been. They stood up too, gathering their things, and I couldn't help but watch them closely, my heart thudding hard against my ribs. As I walked past them to approach my seat, both of them turned their heads in unison, their eyes locking onto me, cold and unblinking, following me with every step I took down the narrow aisle. And I started to wonder, with a sinking dread in the pit of my stomach, if that man's warning wasn't just some strange random encounter, but something I should have taken seriously. A few hours later, we touched down in North Carolina. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels half asleep. The plane's lights dimmed as passengers quietly gathered their belongings, the shuffle of footsteps and hushed conversations filling the narrow aisle. As I stepped off the plane, my heart thumped with a dull, steady panic, my eyes darting around as I moved through the tunnel and into the airport, scanning the faces around me, searching. I couldn't stop thinking about what that man had whispered to me, his words echoing in the back of my mind with every step I took. I kept looking for them, the two men, waiting for them to appear, waiting for them to make a move. And then I was outside, the cold night air biting against my face, carrying the sharp scent of rain-soaked asphalt. The parking lot was dark, lit only by the scattered pools of orange light beneath the old lamps that hummed quietly overhead. My breath fogged in the cold as I walked, pulling my jacket tighter around me, my footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. That's when I saw them. The two men were there, just ahead, peering out at me from behind a red minivan, their heads angled in my direction, their eyes watching me from the shadows. The glow from the overhead light caught the glint in their eyes for a brief, sharp moment before they noticed me looking back. As soon as they realized I had seen them, they moved, slipping back behind the van, hiding, their shapes disappearing into the darkness. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, the cold air suddenly feeling so much colder, a heavy dread settling in the pit of my stomach. I turned and quickly walked back inside the airport, my shoes squeaking faintly against the polished floor, the warmth of the building doing nothing to calm the shaking in my hands. I found a bench in a corner where I could keep an eye on the doors, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. I waited there for half an hour, glancing up every time the doors slid open, every shadow making my heart skip. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called for a taxi, my voice trembling slightly as I gave the dispatcher the address of my hotel. Then I waited, every minute dragging on, the air thick with tension, until I saw the headlights of the taxi pull up in front of the doors. I quickly made my way outside, sliding into the back seat, the warmth of the car surrounding me as I gave one last look at the dark parking lot, searching for any sign of the two men. The driver pulled away, the airport shrinking in the rearview mirror as the roads blurred by in streaks of passing lights and shadows. On the ride to my hotel, so many questions churned in my mind. Who was that man who warned me at the airport? How did he know about those two men and what they might have been planning? And what would have happened if I hadn't listened, if I hadn't been looking, if I hadn't seen them hiding there in the cold, dark parking lot, waiting? The answers never came, and the questions never stopped. This happened just a few months ago. I'm 26. My friends and I, there were 6 of us in total, were at JFK Airport in New York. All of us excited, buzzing with plans, ready to fly down to Florida to spend a week together in a beach house. We had a few more minutes to kill before it was time to board, everyone scrolling on their phones or chatting in small clusters as people moved around us, the airport alive with rolling luggage wheels and muffled announcements. That's when I suddenly felt the urgent need to hit the bathroom. Out of nowhere, a sharp reminder that I downed a huge iced coffee earlier while waiting. I headed in the direction of the nearest bathroom, but as I approached, I froze for a second, baffled by the sight in front of me. There was a line stretching out the bathroom door, wrapping along the wall, people tapping their feet impatiently, clutching bags, glancing at their watches. Great. As I stood there, debating whether I could hold it until we boarded, I noticed a janitor walking by, pushing a cleaning cart slowly down the polished floor, her keys jingling quietly. I stepped toward her, cleared my throat, and asked if there was another bathroom nearby that might not be so crowded.
She paused, looking around cautiously, before leaning in slightly, lowering her voice. "I really shouldn't be telling people this," she said, her eyes darting around as if to make sure no one else was listening. "But there's another bathroom, past that door right there," she pointed. "Down a narrow flight of stairs and to the left." She gave me a small, kind smile before rolling her cart away, the wheels squeaking softly as they disappeared into the hum of the terminal. I thanked her, grateful for the tip, and turned toward the door she had pointed out. It was unmarked, plain, the kind of door no one would think to open, blending into the wall like it wasn't even there. I glanced back once at my friends in the waiting area, then pushed the handle. Sure enough, behind that door was a narrow stairway, the overhead light flickering slightly as I started down the steps, each creak of the old metal under my feet echoing in the tight space. The air grew cooler as I descended, a faint, musty smell drifting up from below.
At the bottom of the stairs was a skinny hallway, poorly lit, the yellowish lights overhead buzzing faintly. The hallway was so narrow that if 2 people were to pass by each other, one would have to press themselves against the wall, turning sideways to let the other squeeze by. The walls were painted in off-white that looked almost gray in the dim lighting, with patches where the paint had peeled away, revealing darker spots beneath. The air felt heavy down there, thick in a way that made it hard to breathe for a moment, and with every step I took, my shoes scuffed quietly on the aging linoleum floor. The hallway stretched ahead of me, empty and silent, the only sound the low, steady hum of the lights above. I found the bathroom right away, the faded sign barely hanging onto the chipped door, which turned out to be extremely heavy, so heavy that I had to lean my full weight into it just to push it open. The hinges groaned, echoing off the grimy tile walls as I stepped inside.
The lights were already on, flickering slightly in the corners, casting thin shadows that shifted across the cracked floor tiles. The air was thick, heavy with a damp, sour smell that clung to the inside of my nose. It was filthy in there. Water stains and streaks lined the mirrors, the sinks were crusted with residue, and scraps of torn paper towels littered the floor. It was clear nobody ever really came down here to clean, the whole room abandoned and left to decay quietly beneath the airport above. Now, this is a little embarrassing to admit, but whenever I use a public bathroom, I always try to make sure nobody else is around so no one can hear me. It's just one of those habits that makes me feel less on edge in public spaces. I checked the single stall first, pushing it open with my foot to make sure it was empty. The door creaked softly, revealing the stall was unoccupied, the toilet inside stained and the metal lock rusted. Feeling relieved that I had the place to myself, I stepped back out of the bathroom for a moment to glance down the hallway, wanting to double-check that the coast was clear. I turned my head to the left, peering down the dim hallway, and froze. There, at the far end of the corridor, in a section where the lights had burned out, leaving only darkness, was someone. A figure, standing perfectly still in the shadows, their shape
barely visible, but just clear enough under the flicker of the distant light for me to see that they were facing me. They didn't move. They didn't say anything. They just stood there in that dark patch of hallway, as if they had been waiting for something or someone. A cold, uneasy chill crawled up the back of my neck, tightening across my shoulders. My breath caught in my throat, the hallway suddenly feeling even narrower, the air pressing in around me. All I could do was awkwardly pull my head back into the bathroom, the heavy door creaking as it swung slightly on its hinges, and pretend that we hadn't just seen each other, pretending that there hadn't been someone silently watching me from the dark.
I went into the stall, the metal door clanging softly as it closed behind me, and just stood there for a minute, biting my fingers, my breath shallow and quick. The thought of that door opening, of that figure from the hallway stepping inside, made the air in the tiny stall feel even heavier, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. And, of course, it happened. I heard the bathroom door creak open, the sound echoing like a scream in the silence, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps across the filthy tile floor. My eyes dropped to the crack beneath the stall, and I saw them. Black shoes, worn and scuffed, stopping right in front of my stall door. The shoes turned slightly, then moved to the stall next to mine. The door shut with a soft thud, and then there was silence. Thick, suffocating silence. There was no sound of him unzipping his fly, no rustle of clothing, no movement, no sound of him sitting down, nothing, just the dead silence, with the faint buzzing of the flickering overhead light filling in the emptiness.
My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears, each beat a heavy thud that made my whole body tremble. I realized in that moment that I didn't really have to go anymore. The fear had replaced everything else, hollowing out any need I'd felt before. I reached for the lock, my fingers shaking as I slid it open with a soft metallic click. That's when I looked up, and I saw him. The man's head was peering over the top of the stall, his face partially shadowed, his eyes locked onto mine, wide and unblinking, just watching me. His pale skin looked almost gray in the harsh bathroom light, and for a split second, everything froze, the world holding its breath. Then it hit me like a punch, and I nearly had a heart attack, my screams bursting out, bouncing off the grime-streaked walls of the tiny bathroom, echoing over and over, louder in the closed space. The man didn't flinch, didn't move, just kept staring as I scrambled to unlock the door fully, my hands fumbling with the latch. I pushed out of the stall, the door slamming against the side, and I bolted, running out of the bathroom, my shoes slipping slightly on the grimy floor as I sprinted up those damn narrow steps, 2 at a time, my breath tearing in and out of my lungs.
The heavy door groaned as I shoved it open, and then I was out, back in the bright, humming world of the airport terminal. I slowed to a walk, trying to calm my breathing, trying to force the shaking out of my hands, blending back into the flow of people moving through the airport. I casually walked back over to where my friends were waiting, their faces lit by the glow of their phone screens, laughing and talking, unaware of the terror that had just unfolded beneath the airport. I was breathing heavily, my chest rising and falling, but nobody seemed to notice. I didn't tell anyone. It felt too embarrassing, too strange, and I didn't want my friends to make fun of me or brush it off like it was nothing. I know, looking back, that probably seems stupid now. We went on to have our Florida vacation, spending days on the beach, laughing and enjoying the sun, taking photos and making memories. We all have a good time. But every night that week, as I lay in bed in the dark, the thought of that creepy man haunted me. His wide eyes peering over that stall door, burned into the back of my mind, waiting for me in the silence. My wife recently took a trip to California with a few of her girlfriends. I was the one who drove her to the airport, and I was there to pick her up when she flew back home as well.
That day, I was waiting around in the airport lobby, scrolling through my phone to pass the time, the chatter of people and the rolling wheels of suitcases echoing in the background. Her flight ended up running a little behind schedule, about 15 minutes late, and I remember feeling that tightness in my chest loosen, breathing out a small sigh of relief when I finally saw my wife, Michelle, and her 4 friends heading in my direction, weaving through the small crowd near the arrival doors. Michelle spotted me, her eyes lighting up, and she waved, jogging over with that bright smile I always missed when she was away, wrapping her arms around me in a big hug before giving me a quick kiss. I said hello to all of her friends too, each of them looking tired but happy, dragging their bags behind them.
But then Michelle suddenly started patting her pockets, her smile fading as a worried look crossed her face. Her fingers moved frantically over her jeans, her jacket, the outside of her bag, searching every pocket twice. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, and told me she had lost her wallet and keys. We stood there for a moment, the sounds of the busy lobby dulling as the realization sank in. One of her friends, kind enough to stay and help, offered to go back with us, and the 3 of us headed back up to the terminal, retracing Michelle's steps with the tension growing between each breath. We searched everywhere, under seats, along the rows of chairs near the gate, in the bathroom, at the cafe where she grabbed a coffee. We even asked one of the airport workers to check the plane for a wallet and keys, explaining the situation as they nodded and made a call, telling us to wait. Long story short, we spent a good chunk of time combing through the airport, looking in every place we could think of, our shoes echoing on the floors as we moved through the terminal with the crowds thinning out as flights departed. But we found nothing, not even a trace.
Michelle kept insisting she had both her wallet and her keys when she got off the plane, swearing she remembered holding them, certain she didn't leave them on board or drop them somewhere along the way. But eventually, after checking and rechecking, we had to call it quits. Exhaustion starting to show on all our faces. A worker assured us they would contact us immediately if the items turned up, handing us a small slip of paper with a phone number to call, telling us to check back later just in case. Michelle was in a sour mood the whole ride home, staring out the window with her arms folded tightly, the reflection of the passing streetlights crossing her face in the dark. I tried to make small talk, telling her we'd cancel her cards and change the locks just in case, but she just nodded, barely saying a word. When we got home, Michelle headed straight upstairs without saying much, and moments later, I heard the heavy thud of her giant bag hitting the bed all the way from downstairs, the sound echoing down the hallway. I was in the kitchen, pulling out a few things to make a quick snack for myself, trying to let her cool off while my mind kept drifting back to the airport, wondering how something like that could have happened.
That was when it happened. A scream from Michelle upstairs, sharp and raw, cutting through the quiet house like a knife, hitting me cold in the chest. For a split second, everything went still, my breath caught in my throat, before I snapped into motion, sprinting up the stairs 2 at a time, the pounding of my feet echoing in the hallway. I burst into our room, finding Michelle standing there, her face pale, her hand shaking as she pointed a trembling finger at the bathroom door. Her eyes were wide, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the words but couldn't get them out. I followed her shaking finger, my eyes flicking to the bathroom door and then to the 2 closet doors across the room. Both closet doors were wide open, hanging crooked on their hinges, and all of our personal belongings had been thrown across the floor. Boxes had been torn open. Papers that were once neatly tucked away were now scattered everywhere, fluttering as the ceiling fan spun slowly above. Michelle managed to stutter out the words, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's someone in the bathroom."
For a moment, I felt like my heart just stopped, a wave of cold washing over me, rooting me to the floor. But I forced myself to swallow it down, telling myself I had to be the man of the house, that I couldn't freeze now.
I stepped forward, reaching for the bathroom doorknob, twisting it, but of course it was locked. I could feel Michelle's eyes on me, wide and terrified, her breaths coming in sharp, quick gasps. Without another word, Michelle turned and fled the room, her footsteps pounding down the hallway and down the stairs. Later, I found out she had run to call the cops, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. Back in the room, I braced myself and started ramming my shoulder against the old, weak bathroom door. The wood creaked under the first hit, splintering a little under the second, the frame rattling with each slam of my shoulder. It took 5 solid hits before the door finally gave way, crashing open, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. The bathroom was empty.
But the window on the far wall was jammed completely open, the cold night air rushing in, the curtains fluttering around the frame. The window was open just wide enough for someone to squeeze through, the middle edges bent slightly, leaving no doubt that someone had forced it open. I stood there for a second, my pulse still racing, the silence of the empty bathroom somehow louder than the chaos that had just filled the house. I went back to Michelle and wrapped my arms around her, trying to comfort her as we waited for the cops to arrive. Her body was shaking against mine, her breathing ragged, and I could feel the fear still radiating off of her. Listening to her describe what happened to the police was bone-chilling. She told them that after she came home, she had thrown her bag onto the bed, not even noticing the closets yet. And then, out of nowhere, she felt something brush past her back, the lightest touch, but enough to make her turn around. And when she did, she saw him.
A massively tall man standing in the middle of our bedroom, walking toward the bathroom, staring at her the entire time with wide, unblinking eyes and a blank, empty expression. His gaze never left her, following her as he moved, silent, his face pale in the dim light of the room. She was so frozen with fear that she couldn't even scream until he slipped into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. It's safe to say he found Michelle's keys and wallet at the airport and saw an easy opportunity to follow her home, to slip inside when she least expected it. We had all of our locks changed the very next day, and we never saw that man again.